So, hello everyone. It's a pleasure to be hosting Renew Education October edition for 2025. And it's my pleasure and deep honor to have Cathy Yitong Li with us. I hope I pronounced it correctly. Cathy will tell us about herself and everything, but I wanted to share with us just a little bit about Cathy, and she will go ahead to make her presentation. And I just wanted to say that I've been so inspired by Cathy, seeing her present in all United Nations conversations. She's been that inspiration for young people, from this says it all. Let me read to you about Cathy. She has been focusing on international climate and environmental policy, multi-stakeholder collaboration, and civil society advocacy since she was a teenager. Kathy, I also wanted to know like how long this has been going on, and you can share with us because there are a lot of young people that have joined us today, even teenagers. So I believe that this will serve as a motivation to them and as an inspiration that they are not too young to contribute to the conversations that are going on. And she has served in diverse advisory and governance roles across 8 United Nations bodies and various international coalitions. Besides, she has also been advising governments and business executives. By profession, Cathy leads global climate and energy policy and advocacy at BirdLife International, the world's largest nature partnership, besides serving as the IUCN Climate Crisis Commission Deputy Chair. Please, with your warm round of applause, your emojis, let's make welcome Cathy for her presentation. Thank you so much for making the time to join us.
Thanks, Shalom. And hi, everyone. It's great to spend Saturday with you all, and including one of my lovely friends on the call, who can also chime in about nature and biodiversity. Shalom, obviously, as folks might know, that I've been on the road for the past month, so happy to make this more conversational and free flow. So, Shalom, what would you like me to? Happy to give a 5 or 10 minute spiel about whatever you want me to talk about, and then we can have a more dialogue.
Okay, so the concept of the this webinar was to explain a lot about nature-based solutions and why nature-based solutions, what has been in existence, and how nature-based solutions will steer the conversation beyond what we already know to something that is more beneficial for the planet. And then we are also I'm looking to hear about ecosystem services and things on biodiversity. Yeah, because there are certain things that we are not very should I say that is not much spoken as much as CO2 emissions. There are other planetary boundaries that are out there, and some of them connect to biodiversity. So how do we care for our planet beyond just emitting CO2 into the environment? So wanted to hear more about that, and I can also pull up some questions if you wish.
Perfect. Yeah, I've seen the 4 bullet points of the context of the webinar in the concept note. Happy to give a 5 or 10 minute spiel based on that, and then happy to answer any questions, Shalom, from you or from others.
Yeah.
Yeah, so in terms of obviously COP30 is coming up in 2 weeks' time, and last night colleagues in Panama wrapped up the CBD, the UN Convention on Biodiversity negotiations between their two COPs, their subsidiary bodies negotiation on SUBSTA, which had a really critical agenda item that successfully went through despite Argentina and some other naughty players tried to block it. Um, I think it was incredible progress seeing this biodiversity and climate change item that successfully went through, which called for many things, including strengthening the mandate of the joint liaison group between the three Rio conventions, which is the UNFCCC on climate, CBD on biodiversity, and UNCCD on land. I would say that's historic progress and is fundamental to what we might want to achieve certainly what I want to achieve at COP30 in Belen. So I think that's incredible. That's incredible progress. That we're now secured in the lead up to the negotiation in 2 weeks' time. So that's exciting. And then for Belen particularly, there's of course various agenda items expected, including this now substa agenda item 15, previously substa item 14 this summer during SB 62, on cooperation with other international organizations, which has been what conservation NGOs and many governments, including Brazil, Colombia, and many others, have been pushing for many years, and now finally, with some progress, hoping to be secured at COP30. And that's, of course, happy to go into a bit more details later on that, but without making it too dry policy, I think linking to what's happening on the ground has been a big focus of my work, especially in the past year. Working closely with my colleagues in Brazil, and also just to mention that me joining today is very much sharing personal thoughts rather than reflecting the views of any of the organizations I'm affiliated with, because I did not get any internal clearance on any of this. So it does not reflect IUCN's view. It does not reflect BirdLife's view per se. Although, of course, a lot of this work I'm sharing about will be what these incredible organizations have been driving. For Brazil in particularly, um, it was really incredible to hear from my Brazilian colleagues in my day job at this recent UN meeting on nature and energy nexus about what they're doing, called the Fly with Brazil project, which is supported by New Energia, a renewable business in Brazil that's a subsidiary of Iberdrola, which is an international renewable company. And they work with local communities and subnational governments and many other stakeholders to focus on what what could be the link on the ground in terms of nature and energy. And this was nominated by Itamaraty, the Brazilian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, to present at this annual UN meeting on migratory species and energy nexus. So I think it's great to see that there are governments like the Brazilian government putting in the efforts to encourage locally led solutions and solutions by civil society stakeholders, and encouraging multi stakeholder collaboration within the country and locally within different states. I think that's really incredible to see. And regional level, um, part of my work in the past year has been working with colleagues in different capacities who are driving efforts regionally, collaborating with the multilateral development banks in the region, but also many others, such as CAF, the Development Bank for Latin America and the Caribbean. So that was truly incredible. And many of you might not be familiar with CAF, but for those of you who are in Baku, they were the ones handing out this beautiful lanyard. So yeah, so I think, and they will have a pavilion this year in Belen. So I would definitely recommend folks to check it out. I think a lot of really incredible stuff is happening there. Um, and then going back to nature-based solutions itself, um, I think at some, I don't know what Mary Claire is doing, but at some point we need her to come off mute and share her thoughts, because sometimes I can be a boring speaker. And but going back to nature-based solutions, there was a lot happening at the recent IUCN Conservation Congress that happens once every 4 years. And for those of you who know that IUCN is the
Oh,
uh,
okay,
world
Jenny.
authority is the world authority for nature-based solutions. Although, of course, the practice of nature-based solutions or ecosystem-based approaches have existed for thousands of years, right? People have been practicing it. It's nothing new. But the term nature-based solutions becoming a multilateral and world-known standard, and well-governed and well-researched, has been, I would say, relatively new since the past years. And colleagues at IUCN, together with scientists, with conservationists, and with governments, have done really incredible work to make it a well-known standard. And then, of course, which led to the UN decision adopted at UNEA 5 in Nairobi. So this year at the World Conservation Congress, I want to say that was 2 weeks ago, or actually it wrapped up about 1 week ago. there was incredible efforts, including the release of the second edition of the standard for nature-based solutions. So I would definitely recommend folks to check it out. Although I think we launched the second edition of the standard, but I don't think it's actually available online yet. But do check it out, and you can already see on the IUCN Nature-Based Solutions webpage that there's a lot of um, guidance, documents, and training materials as part of the new-ish IUCN Academy about what is nature-based solution, what has the story been about developing this standard, what does it look like in real life, what are the safeguards that many governments are trying to follow, and also wanting businesses and others to follow to minimize the risk of greenwashing, to encourage and attract more investment into nature-based solutions. So definitely recommend folks to check it out. Um, and going back to COP30, I think personally, what I really want to see is strong, ambitious decisions on nature and energy and climate and land nexus. That is also with a focus and lens on innovative multi-stakeholder collaborations, as well as of course, equity needs to be at the heart of this. And I think also by linking that by linking that in global policy to national planning, such as the update of the nationally determined contributions under the Paris Agreement, and similarly this thing called NBSAP under the Biodiversity Convention and LDNs under the Land Convention, by fostering these synergies nationally to make sure that governments don't get overwhelmed by tons of things they need to report regularly on, but also equally important, making sure that the governments also foster more synergies in attracting finance, among other things. And then, of course, linking that from global policy to national planning and then to local action, what many of you are driving on the ground. And I think there's a lot of synergies for those of you with the energy focus. Renewables, of course, are much needed, but it also shouldn't and couldn't um, be expanded at a cost to biodiversity, or we should minimize the impact on biodiversity. So I think that's my hope for the next for Brazil, which we will be there in 2 weeks' time, is to making progress in global policy and then linking that to national planning and regional collaboration and local action. So with that, Shalom, over to you. Happy to answer any questions you or folks might have.
Hey, I'm gonna say to everyone, if you want to ask Cathy a question directly, just raise your hand, and we will call on you to ask her a question directly. And you can also turn on your videos if you want to make, if you want to make a deeper connection with Cathy. So I do. I recall seeing coming across your post, and you mentioned that there was a component that has been adopted on. It was about words on fossil fuel um, phase out. I wanted you to talk more about that because I found that post very insightful, and I think it will be useful for some of us that have, been working on climate change and energy transition. I think it's going to be a hope for us, yeah, listening to that agreement.
Yeah, sure. Happy to give a bit of a background. And also, I thought I found a quiet cafe to dial into to this, but apparently it's a buzzing Saturday, so now it's crowded. But I hope you guys can still hear me okay. Um,
Yeah.
so, for those of you who might not know, IUCN, the International Union for Conservation of Nature, that I was referring to, is a multilateral organization outside of the UN, but it's also multilateral. It has dozens of government who are member states, but also has thousands of NGOs who are also members, and all of them have voting power. Although a government that is a state member has 3 votes, and an individual NGO has 1 vote. But for example, my employer is a partnership, so together we have over 50 votes. So there are a lot of dynamics within this interesting governance body. But to pass a resolution like this, motions once every 4 years. It kind of, so you have negotiation tracks, but you also have lots of events and bilaterals and announcements and political processes. So for the negotiation track, last summer during the climate negotiation in Bonn, I can't disclose their names at this stage, but two friends and I were celebrating an anonymous person's birthday in a Brazilian restaurant in the south of Bonn. And we had a few too many um, maracuya mojitos, and we started thinking, what do we want from this once every 4 year opportunity that is the IUCN Congress? And the thing that came up that could truly make history and help the world make progress and also keep IUCN relevant to history is by making more progress on fossil fuel phase out, right? And I think that's the unique value add of multilateral negotiations like IUCN. That's not unlike the UN. Its resolutions aren't legally binding per se, but it does represent a multilateral decision adopted by many member states. So we start working on this together with colleagues from the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty Initiative that many of you have heard of. If not, do check out their website. It's incredible to see how many governments and cities and multilateral organizations and NGOs and celebrities have adopted, have been behind them in supporting their efforts to phase out fossil fuels and calling for the world to negotiate a fossil fuel treaty. Um, so we put in this motion, and also with the leadership of WWF and many other NGOs in the space like NRDC and like my employer BirdLife International. Um, and the negotiation went, it wasn't easy. For those of you who are accredited, who have an IUCN account, you can see online the written down debate between me and a colleague from WWF together with the governments of, for example, France, Spain, UAE, and Japan. So there, it wasn't easy, but I think we were extremely smart in navigating those. So we did achieve consent, well, not consensus, we did achieve progress and managed to find common grounds with a lot of governments. So in the end, the resolution was adopted very positively, and now it's essentially the most ambitious multilateral decision on fossil fuels ever. And it called for a lot of things, including recognizing the supply side lack of governance within the multilateral system. I think we've talked a lot about the non-supply side, right, of phasing out fossil fuels. But the supply side issue, I think, is remain heavily unaddressed within the multilateral process. So I think hopefully this decision will be a stepping stone and a foundation for more discussions and progress within the UN system and other multilateral processes such as IRENA, IEA, and others. Um, and also this you can I can post a link in the chat about this motion that's now a resolution. It called for a lot of things, including, for example, no new oil and gas projects and many other ambitious language. So I think this isn't, let's be honest, IUCN isn't the most well-known multilateral process on Earth, but it is the strongest decision, and it can be extremely valuable for our community, for many of you and others in the space, to use this to call for more ambition with your government because many of them voted positively, and also recognizing that this can be really important to help people to make progress within the UN space and to convince um, particular governments that might not be very keen that, hey, over 100 government agencies have voted positively for this motion, and this does represent what the whole conservation community want. And certainly there are a lot of great work happening by WWF, by IUCN, by BirdLife, by many others on the nature energy nexus that historically hasn't got much attraction, but I think now there's way more understanding around what is the importance, why is it important that that of course we absolutely need energy transition, we absolutely need nature conservation, and why is it so important that we think about those together, and that we can't just build wind farms without thinking about where do we put a wind farm that does not kill all the migratory birds, because the same government is also trying to invest heavily into meeting their commitment to CBD and other biodiversity conventions. So it's thinking about how do we be cost effective for the government and for others, right? If you're a government, you borrow money from this multilateral development bank or this multilateral fund, for example, the Global Environment Facility on energy transition, and you also borrow money for nature conservation, and it would be very silly if the money you borrow on energy transition actually harms the projects you're putting in on biodiversity, right? So it's how to be smart, and at the end of the day, this is better for an individual country and its government in terms of reaching more progress with a set quantity of money. This is better for the so-called donors, the multilateral funds or bilateral governments who borrow this money to this government, right? That they're getting more returns and more progress from a set quantity of finance invested. And this is also better for civil society stakeholders and the overall multilateral process. So I think it's driving that awareness that these issues are so interlinked and helping providing solutions and exchange among stakeholders that what are the solutions and what are the best practices. I think these are all incredibly important. So definitely encourage folks to spread the word. You can find some social media posts about this fossil fuel motion from IUCN and from the Fossil Fuel Treaty Initiative's LinkedIn account and many other channels. So do check it out. I think it's a really incredible efforts by a lot of folks, and including especially the leadership of government of Australia. I think that's incredible as a government with as a powerful government with some somewhat challenging national circumstance, right? We're not trying to pretend that there is a perfect government out there, but with somewhat challenging national circumstance, they can be so ambitious and supportive in a multilateral process. So yeah, I'll shut up here, and Shil, I'm happy to answer more questions from you or other folks.
Yes. Thank you so much. And I believe that that alone gives a lot of hope to people that are constantly advocating for the phase out of fossil fuels. And I think the next question is because you really started with COP30 and some of the expectations at COP30. So I wanted to know if this phase fossil fuel treaty would also be debated at COP30, or this is going to be a position within the IUCN.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. In my dream, yes, we would call for the negotiation of a fossil fuel treaty in a COP30 decision. I think in practice,
Mhm.
that isn't gonna be the case, right? I think we are all aware of the complexity of the climate negotiations and how different
Yeah.
governments' positions are. But I think there is incredible and unprecedented momentum. First on the nature, climate, energy, land synergies within the UNFCCC COP. Of course, there's going to be this decision, this negotiation on substa item 15 for those of you who will be in Brazil. This will be an incredibly important and historic negotiation track, but also on making more progress on fossil fuel phase out and delivering and making progress to truly in the update of the NDCs, the nationally determined contributions, but also in the follow-up in delivering what we already adopted in Dubai in 2023 at COP28 around tripling energy capacity and doubling efficiency by 2030, but also transition away from fossil fuels. I think I understand there are a lot of national challenges faced by various governments who try to be ambitious, but also recognizing the multilateral context is a bit challenging this year. Um, but I think as civil society, for those of you who, whether you are youth advocates, whether you work in renewable companies or NGOs, I think it's incredibly important to keep making noise about that, right? Reminding governments and people that, hey, this is what you adopted in 2023. It's not just, right, we put it on paper and, that's all the work needed and then we can move on to something else. It's hugely important that we are in the phase of implementation within the climate convention. Decision texts are important, but equally important, they're only valuable if they actually get implemented. I think many of you have the solutions that your government need, that the multilateral process needs. I think showcasing what your innovative ideas, solutions to your governments, and helping them figure out how they can do the transition that is viable within the national context of politics, of financial challenges. I think many of you have the answers to the challenges faced by your government and by others in the UN space. So I think there's continued momentum. For example, the leadership of the government of Colombia, which we all know is a big biodiversity champion. We've collaborated on various ministerials, political statements over the years, and it's incredible of their leadership under both the Convention on Biodiversity as the outgoing presidency and in the UNFCCC. And they're actually going to be hosting the first fossil fuel conference in Colombia next year in collaboration with the Fossil Fuel Treaty Initiative. So definitely check it out. I'm not sure if any of you are based near Colombia, but if you do, definitely go check it out next year. And so I think it's incredible to see that there are governments, and I heard the former minister Susanna Mohammed making a speech in London earlier this year around they absolutely want ambitious things, but they're of course recognizing there are national challenges, right? Every country is complicated. It's how do you try to be ambitious, but also making it a just transition and making sure that it's a systemic challenge, obviously, and it requires a systemic solutions, right? We can't just say, okay, we're going to be, fully renewable from next week. So I think it's recognizing where we need to get to, which is of course phasing out fossil fuels, but also then think through how you're going to get there. And I think the answer is equitable multi-stakeholder collaborations and relying on the expertise and solutions that many of you on this call have to offer.
Yes, thank you so much. I think before we get back to the technical question, I'm going to say it again in case you have something to ask, Cathy, please, you can feel free to put on the hand icon or yeah, or just say in the chat box and I will let you speak. And then you mentioned a lot about, people taking on the solutions that they already have. And I do believe that a lot of people, including the ones on the call, have different solutions that they are currently, staring in their regional and local communities. And yes, they really need to keep amplifying those solutions, within locally and also trying to get that globally. So then my next question is really how young people, in fact, generally people that are trying to contribute to the change and have their voices heard, how do they translate some of these local solutions to a global audience? How do they get seen? How do they get to interact? How do they get to get more engaged in the conversations that are going on? And I know that the IUCN also calls for experts, researchers, and all of that. I wanted to ask if there are opportunities for people to directly work with the IUCN or the BirdLife International Association, just whatever that can help people translate not just their solution from the local context, but now able to spread it at a global scale.
Yeah, and I can see Mary Claire has also flagged the question. Well, MC, if you definitely feel free to chime in at any point. I mean, and Shalom, going back to your question, I think there are countless networks and opportunities that are either led by young people or have initiatives that aim to empower young people. Of course, we've seen there are of course always tokenistic initiatives led by people who are not youth, and yeah, I think those always exist. So if you feel like an initiative feels a bit tokenistic, voice your concerns for sure. But I think there are also so many organizations that are trying a lot to empower internal and external young people. And I think I've had the pleasure of working with many of those. But of course, also ones that um, truly just want a selfie with a lot of young people and then post it on their social media and then tell their donors that, hey, we're empower young people, please give us more money, right? I think those exist. But I think in terms of using IUCN and BirdLife as examples, for IUCN, it has 7 expert commissions. Of course, they hire young people as you know in their secretariat jobs. So if that's something you're interested in, check out their jobs portal. But also they have 7 independent expert commissions. There are external experts that I believe there are about 1,500 of them. Sorry, 15,000 of them around the world. So if your focus is climate nature nexus or communications or protected areas or economic policy or environmental law and many other topics, you will find the commission that aligns with your areas of focus and interest, and then just apply to join. It's currently in this rest period once every 4 years, but the application will be reopened, I believe, in early January in 2026. So definitely check that out if you want to engage with them. And for BirdLife, it's as I might not have mentioned, BirdLife is a global partnership of independent national NGOs in 119 countries. Um, for example, in Nigeria is the Nigerian Conservation Foundation, which we work closely with. In the UK is the Royal Society for Protection of Birds, and also in many other countries. So they are legally independent. That's nationally led independent NGO, and together they form this partnership. So um, for those of you based in countries where there is a national partner of BirdLife, there are often volunteering opportunities or paid positions going out. And of course, as the global secretariat, BirdLife International also hires in our global team in the headquarters in Cambridge, but also in our regional offices. For example, we have one in Nairobi and we have one in Brussels, and in the Americas, it's in Quito in Ecuador. So if that's something you folks are interested, definitely check it out. For example, our Brussels team, I think, quite regularly hires energy-focused officers, whether it's on policy or conservation, and they do a lot of incredible work. And actually, I believe it's 2 weeks ago, on the Monday earlier this month, we signed the new MOU with the World Bank on this Africa Eurasian Flyways Initiative, which is very similar to what my employer BirdLife does with other multilateral development banks. And with the Asian Development Bank, we co-convened the Regional Flyways Initiative that with the Asia and Pacific focus, and with the CAF, the Development Bank in Latin America and Caribbean, we convened the Americas Flyways Initiative, which has a focus on the Americas. And together, each of these initiatives aims to mobilize a few $billions each to focus on conservation. And in the Americas, there's a lot of interest from governments and the bank on looking into the nexus between energy and infrastructure and nature conservation. And with the Asian Development Bank, they've been founding this really incredible tool that my day job colleagues are working on called AvaStep. And it's essentially a national energy sensitivity mapping that I'll just type the acronym in the chat. If you Google it, you can see this website that essentially has the mapping of, I believe, almost 10 countries now, and there are about 5 to 10 countries in the pipeline. And many of our national partners also outside of this tool has similar energy sensitivity mappings in their countries around where governments and multilateral funds should avoid planning more energy and another infrastructure, because these are critical routes for migratory species, especially birds. Um, so yeah, so I think indeed there's a lot happening. So for folks interested in whether it's volunteering opportunities or paid positions, definitely check it out. I think there's definitely more to come. And Shalom, would you like me to then take Mary Claire's question or?
Yes, I was going to ask if she would love to come off mute. Uh, if she can, yeah, I
Of
asked her. Thank
course,
you.
I'm very, very happy. Well, I mean, we talked about COP30, right? I mean, COP30 is just around the corner, and I know, Kathy, you're very engaged. I've been already highlighting a couple of things, but based on your expertise and also the highlight of the COP30 president with Brazil, I would love to hear your expectation around nature language, because I know that you and colleagues, and also from your professional background at IUCN, but also BirdLab, have been advocating for it, and I feel now it's kind of a good moment. And also there is a tropical forever forest pledge, I think that's TFFFP or something like this. You know it probably better. Just quickly, like, what are you expecting to hear from this one? And just before you have been also talking about the just transition, which will always be a big focus as well. So it's kind of three interlinked questions on expectations, and maybe also like based on the expectations where can we as young people either being in Belém but also maybe not being in Belém able to contribute.
And of course, she's on a train. I'm disappointed that she is not back home because I have not seen those pandas for a little while. I it's a call to action, very clear. I need a picture of those pandas. Um, but yeah, going to the questions, I think as many of you have seen on the news that the Brazilian government just announced that the World Bank will be the interim secretariat of this Tropical Forest Forever facility. It's a mouthful acronym, but essentially aims to mobilize many billions, if not trillions, of finance for tropical forest in around the world, not just in Brazil. And it's a quite an innovative investment model that the government of Brazil hopes to pull off. And essentially, the funding secured or the investment secured will go directly to the national governments that have tropical forests to conserve, and also with a certain percentage going directly to indigenous peoples, and which is quite an innovative model. So there will be no sort of middleman. It will just be governments and indigenous peoples, and how they're rewarded, how much funding they will get, will depend on how well they conserve these tropical forests. So it's quite an innovative model, and I with my day job, and so both BirdLife and IUCN, together with many other conservation organizations, are part of the civil society steering committee of the TFFF, and it's planning to be launched at COP30. And I think there's a lot of momentum around that, but of course a lot of challenges. So my personal wish is that it does become a success, and I think we need more innovative initiatives like this to demonstrate leadership, especially leadership from the global majority. um, and then going to MC's question about negotiations specifically, I think the the few tracks that are very energy related or energy focused, I think one is um, our all-time favorite, the technology negotiations. America used to be a technology negotiator herself, um, and technology negotiation is also where I started. I think within that, of course, energy is always a cross-cutting theme, right? The mitigation track is supposed to take care of energy transition, and technology process will, of course, touch on energy. I think there's a lot of great progress there, not just within negotiation text, but also in the day-to-day work around the year of the technology mechanism, which includes this implementation arm called the Climate Technology Center and Network, hosted by the UN Environment Program in Copenhagen. There's also this Technology Executive Committee, which produced various publications. And this year, they've made progress also in the past few years on various things. For example, the World what a joint report, I believe, that was launched last year in Baku, together with the Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN, on water, energy, food nexus. There's also they have a work plan pillar on oceans, which Chile and many others have really taken leadership in. There's also a pillar on nature-based solutions, which is cross-cutting, and they've actually put this into the into the COP30 draft guidance to the Green Climate Fund and Global Environment Facility, calling for these two funds and multilateral finance overall to consider the link between climate technology development and transfer, as well as nature-based solutions, looking at how do we foster synergies within national plans, for example, NDCs and NBSAPs and others that mentioned, but also look at, for example, the Global Environment Facility. Apologies for all these acronyms and things, but the Global Environment Facility serves more than just the climate convention. It serves so many conventions. So how do we also think about these synergies across the conventions that this facility serves? Um, and within the mitigation, I think the just transition negotiation has been challenging, to say the least. But I think people have seen a lot of hope this year in the mitigation work program process, within and beyond negotiations. They've had the fifth investment dialogue earlier this year, also in Panama, which had a focus on forest and land use. And I think there was incredible discussion by governments and non-state actors there. So hopefully, with the support of a lot of you who might be in Brazil or not, hopefully governments will recognize the outcomes and the discussion that took place in May in Panama in the decision text. So I think there's a lot of hope there in both the technology process and the mitigation process within negotiations. For just transition, I think it will be a bit of a challenge, but I think there are so many champion governments. So hopefully we will have a positive outcome, but also recognizing um, the world is in a challenging state this year. I'll stop there.
Oh, thank you so much. And so I wanted to follow up on the last point where you mentioned a lot about the focus on land use and some of the context of different conventions that have gone on before COP. So I wanted to know, aside, are there any texts related to ensuring that the Earth stays within the planetary boundaries, or conversations around adopting uh, uh, the scientific knowledge on planetary boundaries? Have that is that reflected in the COP conversations, or it's not really related to what is happening at the negotiation tables?
Yeah, I think the overall ambition is aligned. I think not the word planetary boundaries specifically, perhaps, because there are so many versions of how do we describe the challenges and the solutions, right? But I think the shared vision is definitely reflected in many governments and non-state actors hoping to achieve from the negotiations in Brazil, but also other negotiations. And then, for example, at the last UN Environment Assembly, UNEA 6, that was about a year and a half ago, there was this resolution that was proposed by the government of Japan and supported by many governments that was actually successfully adopted, despite the language got weakened quite a bit around recognizing the synergies of environmental challenges. And there was also a big push on what the UN Environment Program considers the triple crisis of climate, biodiversity, and pollution side of things. But also within the Rio Conventions, the focus is more around climate, nature, and land challenges. And actually, about 2 weeks ago, in my day job capacity, we hosted an event with the government of Mongolia. Um, on the synergies between the Rio Conventions with a land focus. And I think it's really incredible to see that there are global south governments like Mongolia and like others stepping up in these multilateral process, including in UNFCCC, to call for more recognition and alignment of these three challenges, that recognizing they are so intertwined. Which we haven't recognized quite enough in the past 30 years, but also think about what are the solutions that we can help governments and other stakeholders to best address them in a synergistic manner. So hoping that this really positive outcome from the negotiations this week on biodiversity in Panama, which called for strengthening this joint liaison group, which is the coordination body across the Rio conventions, but also thinking about the potential of, for example, a joint work program across the three conventions and many other formats to for them to talk to each other, recognize how these and conducting more scientific research and different types of work on how these three challenges are so intertwined and what are the best solutions that we can help address these three crises that saves that makes maximize efficiency of financial resources, but also best empowers local communities and different stakeholders in a just transition as well.
Okay, we're getting to the end of the webinar. If you have a question again, you can always drop in the chat or raise your hand to ask them directly. I do see a message from Madame Aniedi. She I think would you want to introduce yourself so Cathy would know the incredible work that you're doing in the grassroots level too. And I know that the challenge for COP30 funding is everywhere. I think this year it was really tough, and I heard about accommodation not secured for a lot of people. I don't know the new status on things though, but there's Cathy here to always help us explain a little bit more. Can you hear us? Are you able to speak?
Yes, yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you so much, Shalom. Shalom, I missed your address since the last time since that last webinar, I couldn't reach you and you didn't reach me as promised. Please do today.
Okay.
Do after that. Okay, thank you so much, Cathy. It's very insightful, and I don't know why I always like the Young People's Forum. They are all with energy, and their solutions are very impacting. And when they ask me why are you always with them, I said I started at 18 to be an activist, and I cannot leave them because they are truthful. What they bring is life solutions. If we adults can follow what they say, that there is going to be a lot of achievement in the spaces we are talking about. So kudos to the youth. And I'm still in the mentoring section, still also guiding the youth. My organization is an Young Foundation and an Youth Climate Hub. We are engaged in educating the young men and young women in how to cater for the problems that is facing the society, and also being change makers themselves. You don't only criticize, you don't only ask that they should do this. Start doing it by yourself, and let's see how far we can go with the solutions you prefer. And then after, you now ask for a scale up. So youth in our constituencies are doing so well. The women too are doing so well in the women's collective. We have women that we group them in groups, they do collectives, and then they share it within themselves and do investments. Some are into farming, some are trading, some are even going to school. And it was a big challenge, and I decided to go back to school. I said, these women are challenging me. Let me also join. So the youth in the spaces are doing storytelling, and so far they've planted over 5,000 trees, because I would take the university students to go to the secondary school, so that when they speak to the secondary school, they will be like the role model. This is how I navigated my way. This is how I got my admission without stress. And this is what I'm doing. Despite this is my voluntary work that I'm doing. And I make the secondary school students to go with us when we are going to primary schools. So we select them, and they're really good ambassadors. And what they are doing is very tremendous. If you enter our website, you will see them. And the solutions they prefer, like planting of trees, doing gardens in the school, making them own economic trees. We give school economic trees, that's the palm fruits and the cocoa trees, and we make students own them. So when you are graduating from this school, you need to hand it over to the next student in the next class that is coming, so that it becomes sustainable. And the compound teacher and the agri teachers and then the head of school are made in charge. And we have inspectors that go from time to time from the Ministry of Agri and Ministry of Environment and Education that are working with us, and Ministry of Health, because we also do girls. We got to discover that in the rural areas, most girls drop out of school because of stigmatization during menstrual cycle. Some of them, because of what they are using, some use tissue paper, some can't even afford. And when the thing stains their clothes, they will stigmatize them, and then they will tend to stay away from school. And some men will go to deceive them, those that have painful menstrual cycle. They will tell them, you sleep with us, and they will impregnate them and they drop out of school. So we had to take up this sensitization to go to schools in the rural areas and be able to talk to them, and then we give them sanitary pads, and we also lecture them on
Um,
how to use
yeah, I was
clean.
afraid that Kathy would need to run by 9 at exactly 9. She's very busy. Yeah, she has another meeting. So if I was thinking you would ask the question, yes.
Okay, the
Yes.
question I have is, we need to get out there to the space, please. I need sponsor to come to COP. I have my badge, and I have the accreditation. I am now looking for ticket and accommodation. So I need that sponsor, and at least one youth to come and have that experience from this organization, if possible.
Okay, thank you. Kathy, just under 30 seconds.
Yeah, thanks so much, and really apologies that I have to run.
We understand.
But
Yeah.
I think absolutely recognize the challenges. I think a lot of us, and I'm sure many of you on this call, experienced this over the years, right? And I think at some points I ended up just having to pay for my trip myself. But recognize that not everyone, is able to do so. And but I think, yeah, recognize that this is a challenge that I think majority of young people face in our space. From year to year, I think there is growing support across various initiatives, whether it's regional youth initiatives or global ones, for example. And many of them are now having more ability to fundraise to support these young people. So I would recommend that you try to explore, and then through your networks, and I'm sure many folks on the call can provide ideas. Um, there are organizations that if you get involved with, and they will be able to fundraise, for example, for next year, and then do an internal selection. That, from my understanding, there are some ways to do so, and recognize that there are, of course, financial challenges. So yeah, my advice would be, um, do a scan through your networks on online as well, of which youth networks usually try to fundraise to support the attendance of folks that you work with, and then try to get involved in those organizations. But also, of course, through your own organization, I think fundraising is of course always a way to do that. Or if you work on any projects, and then you can build into the budget of travel. But recognize that, yeah, it can always be quite challenging for everyone.
Yes.
Thank you so
And
much. Thank you.
I will reach out. I reached out, and a lot of emails have made some of those things not able to sort. But I'll reach out, and then we can discuss further, including how getting to COP. I think I would try to share some of the network, the communications that I have, if they will be helpful to support. Since I know you're doing amazing work, Anidi. Thank you so much for joining and always supporting us. And to Kathy, I wanted to say thank you so much. I know that this is has been one of the challenging times, going through all of the conferences, going through all of the meetings, and planning towards COP30. So we are deeply pleased, honored that you had the opportunity to share this time with us. And we'll continue to keep the conversation. Everyone, if you like, you could connect with Kathy on LinkedIn. The way her name is here. You can always connect with her to drive the conversations further. And we will provide a summary of a lot of the things that have been said here. Kathy has mentioned a lot of the expectations for COP30, and has given us hope, because I really feel hopeful towards COP30, hearing about all of the amazing initiative and funding that are now available. So thank you so much for joining the October edition. We've come to the end of the webinar. Thank you so much for joining, and see you in our next edition, which will be the November edition. Thank you, everyone, and have a great weekend ahead. Thank you so much for joining, and
Shalom,
thank you
Thanks,
again.
everyone.
Thank you again to
Shalom,
Kathy.
have you gotten my phone number so that you speak with
Yes,
me?
I took a screenshot immediately you posted it. Thank you so much, Maria. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Bye
I'm gonna
bye.
reach out personally because you already she mentioned a lot about you being a part of the negotiations on the technology item. So that would be a very interesting conversation, and I'll reach out. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you so much, everyone. Yes, I would reach you via email. I have taken your